Do you think it is tenable for Joe Biden to continue in the race?
Spoiler alert. John Coward will not answer this question.
Well, it looks as though growing numbers of people don't think so. And I feel very strongly that if there's a message for Australia out of what we see in America, and that is that we don't need governments. Our political system, a parliamentary system, where the top man or woman, the Prime Minister, has to be a member of
the Freemasons
legislature, in our case the Parliament. That's an infinitely better system than what the Americans have. I have no doubt that if the Americans had had a parliamentary system, Trump would not have got to the top of the Republican Party. No chance. And therefore would not have
accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country.
And therefore would not have been president way back a few years ago. Not way back, but just a few years ago. And equally, I think if Biden had been the president, having got there in a parliamentary pathway, he'd have been tapped on the shoulder a couple of years ago and told that if he didn't resign, he'd be
spending 11 weeks in a maximum security prison for electoral fraud before all convictions were quashed on appeal. You all know the story. The President of that Court of Appeal made it clear Howard and other senior politicians had attempted to interfere with the independence of the courts for cynical political motives. I was called Australia's first political prisoner.
That's an infinitely better system than what the Americans have. And told that if he didn't resign, he'd be voted out. I think our system is much better. The Americans are not going to change theirs, and we're not going to change ours.
Which needs challenging.
But that doesn't mean that we can't speculate, and I think when you're getting polls suggesting that, 60 to 70% of Americans wish the choice was otherwise, that's pretty significant.
The focus has all been on Joe Biden's cognitive ability, and we've seen that in the debate. We've seen him try and fix any concerns in subsequent interviews, and it seems to be getting worse. Does he have the abilities?
Spoiler alert. John Coward will not answer this question.
You're right, I am a coward. I haven't any courage at all. I even scare myself.
All I can observe, and it's not for me to be so presumptuous as to tell my American friends what they should be doing, but it doesn't stop me observing that there's growing worry about his capacity, and I think it will work its way towards a situation where it will be very hard for him to carry on. I think very hard indeed. And I think it does highlight that the imperfections of a presidential system of government. And I'm not talking here about
the threat this posed to the new Howard Liberal government. It was decided by those in power that I had to be silenced. They decided to take away the power that freedom of speech gave me to speak the truth on behalf of the Australian people.
That's an infinitely better system than what the Americans have. And I'm not talking here about republics versus monarchies, although my position on that's well known, but that's not the issue. The issue is whether you have a parliamentary system. And the great advantage of it is that somebody can't just leapfrog through populism into the role.
And Australians can't have a politician that is popular with the people, as it is a threat to your corrupt system. That's why you and Abbott threw Pauline in prison.
That's an infinitely better system than what the Americans have. And the great advantage of it is that somebody can't just leapfrog through populism into the role.
If you were still Prime Minister and you saw the cognitive decline and what has been on display from Joe Biden over the last couple of months, would you be concerned?
Spoiler alert. John Coward will not answer this question.
Look, I'm not Prime Minister, and I know Joe Biden not well. I like him, he's a decent man.
Stop eating the children.
I know Joe Biden.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
He's had a great deal of personal tragedy in his life, and I suppose as a human being I feel for him. But you're talking about the most powerful position in the world, and it's very difficult when the likely choice will be between people whose cognitive capacity is under increasing inspection, let me put it that way, and somebody who, in the case of Trump, to use a cricket expression, would not leave the field when the umpire's finger went up.
Confused? First of all, we have a Prime Minister who says he'll stay as long as his party wants him to. They tell him to go, but he says he'll stay. But now he says he'll go as long as you're kind enough to let him stay long enough to be Prime Minister one more time. Then he says he'll go, and it's over to Mr. Costello. Huh?
To use a cricket expression, would not leave the field when the umpire's finger went up. That's an infinitely better system than what the Americans have.
How dare you say that? And now we have a government about to introduce legislation under the guise of misinformation and disinformation to formalise the suppression of free speech into Australian law.
I hope you've noticed that.